Good evening, everybody. It's your girl, Miss Reid. I'm the creator of DamnDaddy.com, where daddy is drive discussion. And tonight, I have the pleasure of having a discussion with Shy Williams, the founder of Shy Speaks. And she's going to talk to us about education, Black history, and her dad. Hey, Shy, how you doing this evening?
I am well. How are you? Thank you for having me.
I'm doing pretty good. Thank you for being on. I know you said you're feeling a little under weather, but I'm so happy to have you.
Yes, thank you for having me. Yes.
So tell us a little bit about you and your relationship with your dad.
So a little bit about me, and my father. So I grew up let's back up. So my father and my mother dated when they were in high school, and they had me at a young age, when they were in their junior year. My mom and my dad were engaged to be married. Before I was born, and then they were going to be married after I got born. But however, there was a a slight difference between my mother and my father as far as their future goals. My father wanted my mother to pretty much be a stay-at-home wife, right? And my mom had other plans. She wanted to go to college and she wanted to be this businesswoman. So completely opposite of what my father wanted, and that really caused a turmoil and a split between them two, and they ended up breaking up and calling off the engagement. And they tried to work things out from what my father explains to me, but they just never was able to bounce back from that. And so they pretty much co-parented, and my father, he was so deeply in love with my mother, as he explained to me, that he was so hurt by her, ending everything. And I asked him, okay, well, I felt as though you took that out on me. So like when she broke up with you, you broke up with me, because he was in and out of my life. Like there would be times, like as I got older, I would go to his mother's house every other weekend. But I honestly enjoyed going over there because they were my other cousins, my two older cousins. And so we were all around the same age group. So that's mainly why I went over there. He was never truly there. So he would like make promises and not keep them. So that bothered me. And it really caused us to not really have or to develop a good relationship. And it never really regrouped. Never really regrouped. Even to this day. We made some attempts, but not much. He would just make promises and say he would do stuff, or say he was going to come over, and it never played out. But
You said so much in just that brief description of how your parents came to be and how you came to be. What stood out to me though was you felt like when your mom broke up with your dad broke up with you. And I don't know how many people listening can identify with that, but I definitely knew what that felt like as far as stepdad number one and my mom. When their relationship ended, I felt like, okay, well, where does that leave me? I kind of felt in limbo. And because he wasn't my biological dad, he really had no further obligation to me. So it was an awkward space to navigate. So for you, with that being your dad and you spending time with his relatives, I can see how that would be awkward. I kind of had a similar situation. I'll be at my father's mother's house with my cousins and uncles and things of that nature, and he rarely was there. And all of the broken promises and let's go horseback riding, or I'm coming to get you this time. And at what point did you say enough was enough? Like I remember when I was like, nah, I'm not doing this anymore, because it was so many. I got to be a teenager, a preteen, and I had plans to hang out with my friends at the mall, and I'm like, oh, my dad is trying to hang out with me. Okay, well, I'm not gonna go to the mall. I'm gonna go here. And then he wouldn't show up, and it's like I could have been doing my own thing. So what was your breaking point? When did it become too much for you and you decided like, nah, I don't believe you anymore?
For me, diving a little deeper into the story, I had my turning point because I was like, I didn't care. Like, I was daddy's girl. Like, because I wanted the relationship. So I would, regardless of how many times he would make promises and not keep them, I would give him another try. and another try and another try. I'm like, okay, well, he's going to hold on to his promise this time. This time is different. And my mother never spoke ill about my father. She allowed me to be able to see him for his true self and his true colors. But it really changed for me one day. I was a teenager. I can't remember exactly how old I was, but I want to say maybe 14, 15. I know it was before my sweet 16. And I was being nosy in my mother's paperwork, and I came across the court transcript of my father taking my mother to court for custody of me. This is while my mother is away at college. So I was with my grandmother. Yes. So at first they were going just for him to pay for child support. And out of the blue, it switched to going for custody, full custody. And his argument was that, well, she's away at school and my daughter's with her grandmother. So that caused my mother to pretty much have to go to school part-time and come home because, of course, she didn't want her child to be taken away. So for me, and I heard a little bit about the case, growing up. And my mother never put the transcript in front of me. It was me. I went to go look for it, and I found it. And I read word for word what everyone was saying, what he said, what my father's mother said about my family. And it was like at that point, like, okay, so you all are phony. That was my interpretation of it at that point in time, because I felt as though they were trying to buy my love. Like, so, my mother was a single mother.
Did you say phony?
Phony, yes.
Okay, I want to make sure I heard you correctly.
Yeah, so, because like they, it can get ugly. Anybody who has gone through a custody battle, it can get ugly because you're trying to win, right? And from what I read, from my eyes to the piece of paper, I just felt as though, okay, well, you are like a fake facade. So this is how you said how you truly felt, but how you act towards me, because you think that I don't know these things. And I felt as though they were trying to buy me, because my father's mother, she would give me anything that I wanted, like anything I needed. Every time I returned back to my mother after the weekend, we stopped on Park Ave. So those of you from Plainfield, Park Ave on Baskin Robbins, when it used to be there, like. And we would stop there, and she would give me ice. They would give me ice cream, knowing I got two brothers at home. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, now that as an adult, you don't do that. It's not right. So, I just thought they were just trying to buy me. I would come back with, when it was time for school, I would come back with, clothes and shoes.
Things your mom couldn't provide.
Yes. Yes. And again, it wasn't my father, because he couldn't afford it. It was mainly my grandmother, his mother. But yeah, that was the turning point for me when I read the court. I think I said court. I'm not sure if I said college, but the court transcript. That was a turning point for me.
So you said to this day the relationship still hasn't been repaired. What were some of the efforts that have taken place over time to try to rebuild or, repair that broken trust that those transcripts caused for you?
So recently, just 2017, my grandmother passed away. My mother's mother passed away, and her and I was extremely close. As I told you, she took over when my mother was going to college. And I remember my father didn't attend the funeral, and neither did his mother. So as the years progressed, my maternal and paternal grandmothers became really close friends, like extremely close, like more than like I still felt the way I felt toward my father's mother. So, I didn't have that relationship, but my two grandmothers were best buds. And so when my grandmother, my baby, that's what I call her, when she passed away, my father's mother didn't attend the funeral either, and she lived a few blocks away. So I became upset. You're going through it and you're grieving, and you looking around like, hey, who's not there, because my grandmother had such a big heart. And I remember reaching out to my father, asking him, why didn't you attend the funeral? And he said to me, oh, well, I had a photo shoot because he's a chef. He had a photo shoot and he couldn't make it for Facebook, something like that he had. And I said, that doesn't make sense. You can postpone a photo shoot. You can't postpone a funeral. And this is your daughter, your firstborn, your daughter's grandmother who passed away. So when he kept apologizing, and he wrote, and he tried to say, okay, I thought you said you wanted us to get together. So this was the first time that my father and I actually sat down together and broke bread. And it was a couple weeks after my grandmother passed away, and we had breakfast together. Now, mind you, here's the funny thing about this story. We had a set time and a set date, and I was staying at my mother's house because it was right after a couple weeks after the funeral. So, the family is still together, and I overslept. And he had texted me like, "Oh, I'm waiting for you. Just let me know when you're on your way." Shamika, it was like a half an hour. Like, he's already waiting for me. So I felt bad. So I jumped up and I texted him like, okay, let me just hop in the shower, get dressed. I'll be there. And so I pretty much arrived like an hour later. And he was still sitting there. So to me, I was like, okay, well, wow. That's okay. Well, Shar, you've been waiting for him your entire life. At least he can do is wait an hour and a half. But that really touched me. So, we sat down, we broke bread, and we talked, and he told me his side of the story, because for so many years I only had my mother's side of the story and the court transcripts, and it was pretty much close in line. It was some things my mother just did not tell me, right? But he just expressed me how much he loved my mother and how he was just so hurt. And I explained to him like how I felt. Like, I felt, when she hurt you, you took it out on me, because I had nothing to do with that. That should not have been. And so we did break bread that time. And then I think the following week we went bowling, because he's like a professional bowler. So he taught, like, I always, even as a kid, like when I would visit his side of the family, like we would go to like bowling events and championships that he had. So I'm like a fake bowler. So, but he showed me like how to actually bowl. So that was big for me. And he like bought us like little snacks at the bowling alley. So that was good. So we only met twice. We were supposed to meet another time after the bowling. And what really turned, I don't want to say turn my stomach, but made me think about, what some of the things that he said. He said, oh, well, because he's in North Jersey, I'm in South Jersey now. And he said to me, I actually never said this to him, but he said, oh, well, next time maybe we could meet halfway. And I'm thinking to myself, hold up, brother. You got all these years to make up for it. The least you could do is come down the turnpike. I shouldn't, like, and that's that whole, being a gentleman. And I just looked at, when he said that to me, it really didn't sit well with me. But we made attempts to try to meet up for a third time, and it just never happened. It just went back to being normal. And for me, like, through these,
so you telling me from the time you were a teenager and you found these court transcripts, you had not sat down with him until last year when your grandmother passed?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. Like I've let me see. Like he'll come to like milestone events, like graduations. Like he was at my undergrad graduation. He was at my master's graduation. I don't think he was at my police academy graduation. I don't think he knew about that. But he'll make it out to, I don't even think I told him. I don't know how he found out. Maybe through like my cousin, with them being invited, or my brother, from my father's side. But yeah, like there were attempts. Like I remember when I was getting ready to go away to college, I was being recruited to play ball and I needed extra money. And I remember my grandmother, my baby, taking me over to his mother's house, because that's where he had lived at the time, and me asking him, like Dad, I need help with paying for school, because if I don't get the money, I'm not going to be able to go. Like I don't work this hard. I'm being recruited. I got accepted. Help me out. And the man just flat out told me no, like he didn't have it. And And I remember, like, when he said that to me, I remember just snapping, because, like, when you work so hard for something and somebody's not in your life, and I don't ask you for much, or I don't ask you for anything, when I'm coming to you for something that is such life-changing for me, and especially, like I said to him, I said, you've never even accomplished this. Like, how do you not say, okay, well, Shy, I don't have it, but I'm gonna find a way? You know, like, I don't know, like, the definition of a man, you know, a definition of a father, but, you know, my mother found a way, pretty much. You know, my mother helped me out. She found a way. My mother and my grandmother, they found a way. And then from there, they set me off.
When you have one side of your family that's willing to do A, B, and C, you kind of find it insulting when the other side is not showing effort to at least do A. And sometimes they genuinely just don't have the means or wherewithal, and just, you know, it's not an intentional slight on you, but you feel like, I've seen these people do an enormous amount of work to do A, and all I'm asking you to do is ask. Like, you know, like, just, you don't even gotta put the line across. Just get me the little triangle top. Like, you know. So I get you. I get you. I won't say that I had that experience. I definitely feel like my father's family, you know, my aunt and my uncles and everybody were supportive. But there are instances where I felt like, nah, my mom's side of the family went above and beyond, and I'm just asking for a nickel. But I did learn, like you said, that, you know, you feel like you didn't ask for much. I've learned in recent years that a lot of times I wasn't asking. So I was in need, but I didn't know how to ask. And then when I began asking, they were more than willing to do. If they had it to do, it was like, yeah, here. And I'm like, dang, that's all I had to do all this time? Like, you know, so many other times that I struggled. It was like, oh, I mean, I forgot I know y'all. Y'all could have helped me before. So I definitely get that feeling where it's like disappointing. Like, hey, I don't really ask you for anything at all. And then you kind of have that pride going on. You got to swallow your pride and get there and ask. And then I've done my part. I've asked, and you can't help me. What you mean you can't help me?
Yes, exactly. Especially when it's something that is such a, like, it's such a milestone, and it's something that you as a parent, like, your child wants to accomplish this task, this big accomplishment, and it's something that you didn't do. So take the pride. Okay, you know what? You know how your parents always tell you, I want my kids to have, you know, more than me, or be better off than me. So, like, I didn't understand it. Like, that's why I said to him, like, I'm trying to do something that you didn't even do. Like, how do you just say no? Like, how do you not find a way? Like, and I mean, you just didn't try. You just flat out just said no. You didn't even say, Sean, I'm going to try, and, you know, and see where we go. But I'm gonna try. I didn't even get that. So, you know, that was like a slap in the face.
You know what I keep thinking about is that you said that he was still in love with your mom, and I know some people in similar situations where the dad is kind of bitter, you know, to put it plainly. They're bitter, and they see this woman that they imagined this life with having a whole different life without them. And sometimes the child that they created with that woman, not even in the picture, you know. They, like, you know, they're so focused on, how does she have this life without me? That even though they might have other kids, they might have great jobs, but they're stuck in a moment where, you know, they want to be with that woman, or they don't comprehend how that woman can have a life without them. And it puts them in a place where they don't realize the damage they're doing to the child that they have, or the children that they have with that woman, because their heart is still stuck in a relationship that ended so long ago.
Yep. Yeah. Like, I feel as though he had the whole life planned out for him and my mother, and she just saw it differently. You know, she didn't want, like, she saw bigger than Plainfield, I guess you can say. Like, she really wanted to spread her wings, and she didn't want, you know, her having a child at an early age to hinder her.
So you said that her desire and her thirst for knowledge and education was part of the reason that they went their separate ways. Is that something that you see a drastic difference between your paternal and maternal sides of the family? Is education more prioritized in your mother's lineage than it is in your father's lineage? Because you just said when you were trying to get your funds together for undergrad, you said to him you didn't even do this, and it seems as if it wasn't something that he even had on his radar as a desire to do.
Mm-hmm. I would say on both sides of the family, as far as education is concerned, it's pretty parallel. Um, my mother and I, for our immediate side, we're the ones that hold the degrees. On my father's side and on the immediate side, I think I'm the only one. So it's pretty much the same, unfortunately.
So let's talk about, all of the things you do in education, because I kind of asked a dual question. Tell us about you and your relationship with your dad. And you went straight into that relationship, but you really tell us about you. So we're going to start fresh. Tell us about Shy Williams of Shy Speaks. And then when you're done, I want to hear more about what you do in education.
Okay, so Shy Williams, I'm an author and a professional speaker, and I talk, yes, Proud Black Girl and Proud Black Boy. I have 2 children's books, and they're both educating our youth to love themselves, to love what they see when they look in the mirror, and that to embrace being unique, learn to walk to their own beat, and that you're going to be picked on, you're going to be joked about being different from our hair, wearing our hair different styles, and to our hair being different textures, to most of all of us being different shades, but embrace that, because we should start glorifying being Black. So that's why they're both titled Proud Black Girl, Proud Black Boy. And it's at this point that we should be glorifying ourselves. So when I created these books, I first, like, I was going into Target, and I was looking for Black books, right, by Black authors, Black illustrations. And at that particular time, in that particular Target, I couldn't find it. I could not find any. Like, the closest one I found was what's her name, Chelsea Clinton book, and it was about the book with it was like one Black author, and it was another white author, and I think it was about different girls with different career paths, and that was like the only one that I could find. So I was like, hey, you know what? I'm going to create a book, and I wanted to make a book where when they open it, like my book, The Proud Black Girl, talks about the coconut oil. So I wanted to get down to the nitty-gritty. So that's about me. I'm an author. I'm a speaker. I am a former detective turned social justice activist. I strive for educating, empowering, and inspiring the urban mind and the urban youth. And I speak a lot about transforming the lives and transforming the minds of our youth, to helping them to understand that you can overcome your circumstances and your situations. It begins with your mindset and developing a growth mindset, and just understanding and having the notion that failure is not an option. So by any means necessary, I'm going to pick myself up, as Martin Luther King would say, by the bootstraps, and I'm going to press forward, despite the stigmas that's put on us, despite, people saying that nothing good comes from our type of neighborhoods, that if we could work hard for it, that we can accomplish anything. And I always talk about education. Like, a lot of our youth, they struggle with education in the challenging subjects from math to reading to writing. I was the once that student. So when I speak to these kids, I see a reflection of myself in their eyes. I didn't always value my education, which a lot of our youth to this day don't. They don't value their education. They don't take it seriously. But when your back is against the wall, you'd be surprised at what you can accomplish. So it's just explaining to them that intelligence, based off of my theory and my experience, is not always about. It's not always about intelligence. Is all about how are you willing to work hard for it? Are you willing to put in the time to learn how to study? Are you going to be able to put in the time and the effort to turn a weakness, a challenge that you have in a certain subjects, and bring it into a strength? So I'm big on education, and it's like education to me gives you power, because knowledge is power. Because when you have knowledge and you have education, it allows you to be independent, to be able to think for yourself.
I hear that. I hear that. Okay, there was so much you just said. So you said educate, empower, and inspire, correct?
Yes.
The urban youth. So I had gone to the library yesterday and saw one of my former students in there acting a complete fool. But the setting in which that I worked when I met that child, that's typical behavior for that particular that child in that school setting. And I was just observing how the library staff was going to respond. So something new that I'm interested in is works workplace trainings, not just on diversity and inclusion, but real life situations. Because after I saw how that person was acting, I looked around. It's a Friday afternoon, and I see another child sitting at a table, no book, no electronic device being used. They might have had some headphones on, but they weren't engaging with any text or anything like that on the phone, just leaning back in a chair. And I realized they might just be escaping the cold. Like, whereas somebody else that hasn't had any trauma informed care training or any of these experiences in urban school settings might have gone into a panic. Oh, these children are rambunctious. I feel threatened. I feel unsafe. They're watching me. They're sitting here in the library not doing anything. So I think it's definitely important to talk about educating, empowering, and inspiring, because perception is a dangerous thing. Like, even somebody with all of my training and experience in working with children, those weren't my first thoughts looking around. Like, I had to soak it in and be like, you know what? Nah, this very well could not be a threatening situation. This could be that. And, a reason I think that what you do is important is, one, I heard you say by any means necessary, and then say Martin Luther King by the bootstraps. And I'm like, look at you putting Malcolm and Martin all together in one little quote scenario. But I was sharing with somebody today, actually, that I believe it was Malcolm X that I was reading. And he said, if they don't treat you right, what makes you think they will teach you right? And it was about integration in the school system. So I definitely, we were talking
that
about.
Sound like Malcolm. That sound like Malcolm.
Yeah, and we were talking about the state of Virginia, and I lived in Virginia for a brief period of time during my senior year at Howard with some relatives, because I didn't have housing on campus. And at the time, they had a child in the 4th grade who would like ask me for homework help when I was there. And they kept talking about these interns. So like for like a month, they were doing all these different Virginia related projects. They had to like make the state of Virginia out of clay. So she's making dough in the middle of the night. Her parents got to be up for work in the morning super early. It was a lot of stressful situations going on. And her mother was like super annoyed, like, why everything is about Virginia and they keep sending all these projects home. So I kind of stepped in to help. And I'm like, well, what interns? And she says, the interns that came from Africa to pick tobacco. I was like, excuse me, what? Like, excuse me, let me see the book. Let me see the book. And it just made me think about, I know on social media, people have been sharing images from a textbook in Texas where they erased the Trail of Tears and they skip over slavery altogether. And this is a very real thing that's happening. Like, people talk about whitewashing and cultural appropriation, but the erasure of people's histories is such a big deal, and it's being overlooked. And there's so many things still that I don't know. Today I went to the Reginald F. Lewis Museum, and their current exhibit is about Romare Bearden, who's born in Charlotte, North Carolina. And there was a couple also perusing this exhibit, and the guy says to me, oh, we're from Charlotte, and we knew nothing about this artist. And this artist is from Charlotte. And that's crazy that we had to come all the way here to Maryland and learn about that. And I said that happens so often that, you don't know about the history makers and the trailblazers of any background, but specifically in the Black community, a lot of times you don't know about who made history from your city, your state, your county, whatever, until you go off somewhere else and somebody somewhere else is acknowledging them. So I definitely think it's important to use education outside of the classroom. And I say this as somebody who spent several years in the classroom working with kids. It's not enough. The teachers, that I taught with, I felt myself, and some that are continuing to be in the classroom are overwhelmed. The curriculum is constantly changing. It doesn't allow a lot of flexibility to cater to the needs of the children that you actually serve. And I do think I see some progress, specifically in Baltimore. They've introduced 2 books in the past few years since I've been living here for older kids that are written by Baltimore homegrown artists. I know one is The Cook Up. I know his first initial was D. I can't think of his last name. And then the other one, Kondwani Fidel, and Hummingbirds in the Trenches and Raw Wounds, are now in the school system. So I do see some progress, but I think that's because there's a lot of people working on the ground and, working with these authors. The educators themselves know the authors personally, and it's allowing that transition to happen. But like I said, if they don't treat you right, what makes you think they will teach you right? And
absolutely.
for some, it's not even intentional. Like, they themselves have gone through this educational experience that has erased or overlooked Black people, that they're not even intentionally not teaching you, about yourself. I'm sorry, I kind of went on a rant there.
I truly believe that, as adults to our youth, just our culture in general, that we should, that we should be educating ourselves on our actual history. And when you think of the 4th of July, right, there's so many towns and municipalities having 4th of July parades, and you see our people attend, right, and we're wearing, like, we're showing our patriot duty by wearing 4th of July attire. But to me, it saddens me, because I say to myself, that's like someone throwing a surprise party for me in the middle of April, and I walk in and they're like, "Surprise, Sha, and happy birthday," and I'm like, "My birthday's in November. What is all this for?" Wrong date. Our emancipation, 4th of July was not our emancipation. That's why we have Juneteenth. So it's like, okay, it just goes to show, like, it's a mockery. Like, we don't even realize, I don't even think we really realize just of how much of a joke we're taken, right? Like, we're conditioned, history conditions you to think a certain way, right? As you talk about the history, how it being deleted and distorted, right? That's also another form of being conditioned, right? Transforming your way of thinking. In a sense, we're like puppets, like with strings attached to us. So I'm only going to give you this amount of information. I'm going to distort it. I'm going to tell you that they weren't slaves that came on the boat. They were actually interns. What? So that just flabbergasted me. I never heard that one. And that's just appalling. So, that's why, like, through my company, Shy Speaks, I created the Black Cultural Journey bus tour, and it allows travelers. We start in New Jersey and we travel down to Atlanta. We go to Montgomery, Selma, Birmingham, and Memphis, and we visit historical sites and museums, and it allows travelers to be able to get the information for themselves. Everyone be able to develop their own experience. I did it this just past Juneteenth, and I walked the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and being able to walk that bridge freely. I had my Proud Black Girl shirt on, and I'm taking a picture on the bridge, and so just to give you an idea of how that image looks, it's me sitting on like the very top of the bridge with the Edmund Pettus Bridge label behind me. And for me, like, that was monumental for me out of the entire trip. And it was monumental for me because Edmund Pettus, he was a Confederate officer. So, and on top of that, you think about Bloody Sunday, when the civil rights campaigners were attempting to walk from Selma to Montgomery down to the state capitol to fight for voting rights. And they were stopped and they were beaten badly by the Alabama State Police. So for me to be able to walk that bridge freely and knowing that history, it made me so emotional. And so like I put this tour together for anyone, you know, whether you're Black, white, Hispanic, for you to be able to get the information, because I know that, like you said, it's not enough in schools, right? In public schools or in any type of school setting. Like there's more that needs to be talked about outside of those hours. And also the information that's provided in schools is deleted and distorted. So providing that opportunity for those to be able to get that information for themselves and develop their own opinion from what they read is just monumental. But there's definitely needs to be more discussions around it, about it. And we should not be shying away from the subject. Like, this is what happened. It's America's ugly truth. You know, their ugly history. Embrace it. Like, it is what it is at this point. But it's not like let's hide it. But no, what are we going to do to move forward? Because, you know, in actuality, it's only a few of us that are able to excel based off of some of the equality that they gave us, right? But it's not all of us. Like, you still have certain areas in the United States and certain cities, predominantly urban, that look like third world countries, you know, and we're still struggling. And that's not, you know, we fought for equality. We're not equal.
You know, what's something that's interesting to me, while you were talking about, you know, offering this bus tour to anyone who wants to educate themselves, what I kept hearing in my head is, you don't know what you don't know. So I didn't know anything about Juneteenth until a high school friend of mine, I think she left my sophomore year of high school, she moved to Texas. And, you know, I'm from Jersey. I went to South Plainfield High School, which is predominantly white. And for me, I remember that was the first time I didn't have Martin Luther King Day out from school. Like, you know, yeah. In 2004 through 2008, I remember, you know, like, are we in school today? And I'm from a predominantly urban area in Jersey City. I remember going to PS 41 school, and I knew all the words to Lift Every Voice and Sing. When I transferred to a more diverse school, because 41 was predominantly Black, and the school I transferred to after that, I believe in the third grade, I had to learn the words to God Bless America. I didn't know them. And, you know, I still had a lot of Black classmates, but I also had a lot of Filipino classmates and, you know, Puerto Rican and Dominican classmates. So it was more diverse because there wasn't just all Black kids. But I remember distinctly, like, oh, it's another song. And I think about, you know, what that did for me developmentally, that my foundational educational experiences were very deeply rooted in the Black community. And I liked going to 41 because my mom went there. You know, my grandparents live across the street from there. They had moved way before I started school, but the teachers that my mom had were still there, and a lot of them were Black. And unfortunately, I didn't have the Black teachers while I was there. Like, you know, I specifically had a very terrible experience with my kindergarten teacher, and she also had left back both of my mom's brothers, and then she stabbed me with a pencil in the kindergarten. And my mom came to the school and she said to her, "I'm not my mother, and you won't treat my child the way you treated my brothers." So there were some problems there. I'm not even gonna pretend it was a perfect place because it was a predominantly Black place. But, you know, just thinking about the difference between having a predominantly Black foundation and then from third grade to eighth grade having a very multicultural situation going on. And then in high school, we had Multicultural Day. I was the president of the International Club, which, looking back on it, was funny to me because it's like, I'm a Black girl from New Jersey, and at the time I had not been anywhere else. And I'm the president of the International Club when we got kids here who are immigrants from Vietnam, like, you know, first generation Ecuadorians, you know. But anyway, that's just something that I was interested in, and I worked my way to become the president of the International Club. So I really enjoyed learning about history, and I was going from predominantly Black foundation to a predominantly white high school experience, it was very different. I'm like, wait a minute, y'all in school for Martin Luther King Day. There were a lot of subtle hints of racism there. Like, I remember I got a doobie one time, and my teacher asked me why I had a spaceship on my head. So just little things like that, where it was the lack of cultural sensitivity. And I only had one Black teacher in the whole building in high school. Miss Sophia Adams, shout out to her. I love her. She came to my high school graduation party. She came to my college graduation party. She's the truth. And no, she really was she was Jamaican, and she was math teacher, and she didn't give up on us. And I did really well in her class. She made it a competition. Like, every week she would hand out your ranking in class. It was like me and one other Black guy was back and forth for number one in her class. It was a competition, but I liked her. I liked her approach to things, and I liked the fact that she kept in touch with me and continued to be invested with me after I graduated. Okay. But seeing that you do all of this, I do want to go back to you saying former detective, but what types of experiences did you have around Black history and education in a household that kind of inspire you to do this work? Or if they weren't in a household, what kind of inspires you to do this work?
I'll be honest, in my household growing up, we didn't really talk much about Black history. And that's why I can't wait to have kids. My mother drilled in me how to be independent, how to handle my business, and not to be dependent upon someone else, because again, she see that I'm extremely saddened by my father every time he makes a agreement to something and he doesn't follow through with it. So she instilled in me to, by like, whatever it is that you want to accomplish in life, whatever it is that you want to be able to purchase, you have to be able to handle your business. Like, don't depend on somebody. You go out there and get it, period. So she really instilled in me how to handle my business, not really much about Black history. So for me, with the Black history, it really ties into my experience and my exposure as a detective. And for me, I remember when I was a detective in Camden, at the top of my second year, I remember driving down one of the main streets, and it just, like, everything just stopped around me. And I questioned, like, how did we get here? And it wasn't just saying we as in Camden. It was America. It was Camden. It was Black people. It was this world, because in Camden, there's so much poverty. There's people who are strung out on drugs, prostitutes, alcohol, people struggling just to make ends meet. And, I will respond to houses because of cases and things of that nature. And I would just see, like, the conditions in which people were living. And it just saddens me. And I just question, like, how did we get here? And that answer to that question did not come until, I think, 3 years later, last year, when I attended an event for a book called The Color of Law. It was a lecture hall at LaSalle, and it was the author, Richard Rothstein. And he talks about in his book how the government segregated America. And based off of policies by the federal government that were passed, and different organizations that contributed to subsidized housings and from the building structures and things of that nature. And from there, it sparked my interest. So that's why I always say that, that if you start learning your history, I can't guarantee you that you would develop an understanding, that you may or may not develop understanding, or you may not even be able to rationalize with it. But I can guarantee you that you will become intrigued, because you start to learn. Like, it goes back to that independency, being able to think for yourself. And for me, from the law enforcement side, there's a tight line of connection between the justice system, law enforcement, and the history of being Black in America. And for me, like, I'm once I finish my doctorate, I'm looking to create programs that tie into that. So that's the path that I'm on, because they are coincide. They do link up. and we need to stop shying away from it. But I wish that in my household that Black history was taught more, but unfortunately, I won't say unfortunately, because my mother instilled in me what she felt as though that I needed, and it has made me into who I am today. And even as a social justice activist prior to me leaving law enforcement, I just didn't like some of the injustices and how certain cases were handled based off of the color of the person's skin. And I realized that when I left one agency going to the next, and I just said, you know what, this isn't right. I'm a virtuous woman, and you're not going to use me as a pawn. Because when you think about law enforcement, here I am, a Black female. I'm not the typical stature and structure, or typical stature of a police officer, right? So I completely, I'm the true unicorn to it, and I embrace that. Like, I embrace being the unicorn, being the odd person and being the one that speaks up. Again, that's how my mother raised me, to voice your opinion. So I've always been vocal. I've always been independent, and I have no problem with that. But that, those doors has led me to where I'm at today, with learning more about who I am and what I am.
Okay. I heard a lot there as well. Talking about leaving law enforcement, but the policies and things that are in place. I watched the movie The Hate U Give. Have you seen it?
Yes.
There's a scene where the main character has a conversation with a relative that happens to be in law enforcement, and
I'm gonna sip my tea.
The person, the main character, is trying to rationalize what they've witnessed, and they say to the relative that's in law enforcement, why didn't the police officer just say, put your hands up? If you think you see a weapon, why don't you just say, put your hands up? Or something, why use your weapon as a gun as opposed to the weapon as your voice? And then they ask, the uncle gives this breakdown, of what goes through the mind of a police officer in the moments of being in that type of experience, where it's like, if it's two people in the car, they setting us up, is this happening? Is that happening? Is the passenger safe? Is this passenger being abused? Like, all these different things take place first. And when you see the weapon, you don't say, put it down. And the main character says, but if you were in a white neighborhood and it was a white person you pulled over, would you say, put your hands up then? And he says yes. And for me, I'm like I saw it two ways. One, I felt disappointed. I was hoping that, even though reality shows otherwise, that they would say no, that the same thought process takes place. But two, I had to take into consideration that this is a Black law enforcement officer. And if this Black law enforcement officer was to shoot an innocent white person without first instructing them to put their hands up, then 9 times out of 10, there would be an indictment against that Black officer. So it's funny that you mentioned that. And you said the name of the book was The Color of Law?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought about redlining policies, and just a conversation I had today. I live in Baltimore. I moved here almost 7 years ago because a relative of mine wanted to move here, and I'm like, okay, well, I have a job opportunity here, and if they come, we can both build together. And they haven't made their way up here yet, but they mentioned, they asked me recently, what's an area to avoid? And I'm having a conversation with my friend. I said, well, I kind of didn't want to answer that question because, in my opinion, if you buy in the neighborhoods that nobody really wants to live in right now, you might not feel the safest right away, but you can at least afford it and spark that revitalization as opposed to waiting for a developer to displace people. Or in Baltimore, you really don't need to displace anybody because there's so many vacant neighborhoods, but you know, to come and revitalize it, and then you can't afford to be here. So I'm just the type of person that if I could afford a home in a not so great neighborhood right now, I would do that as opposed to wait for it to get great. Because to me, when we do that, and I think that people of color do that way too often, we talk ourselves out of things, and we don't see the long haul. Like you were talking about access and things earlier, and all I could think about was in my grocery store, I used to be able to buy groceries, buy Essence magazine, buy Black Enterprise or Ebony magazine all in one trip. My grocery store, I can walk there if I wanted to. And at the top of the year, after having a vision board party with my friends, I wanted to go buy Essence magazine. I used to have a subscription to Black Enterprise, but they only produce bi-monthly now, so I didn't think much of it to not see Black Enterprise. I just figured, you know, maybe it's not the month that they're out. And after maybe 3 or 4 trips in the top of the year, I went on Instagram and I'm like, hey, where the magazines at? And the grocery store chain replied to me and asked for the location and said they would look into it. I sent them the location. I haven't heard back from them since. It's November now, and I'm almost certain that was in January. And between then and now, I have continued to highlight in my Instagram story and send to the grocery store chain, where did all the Black magazines go?
Wow.
In addition to that, I've seen an increase in non-Black patrons in the grocery store, which is no big deal. You know, they could be visiting, they could be moving in, but you know, they got to eat as well. But last night in particular, I went to the grocery store. The layout slightly changes every time I'm in there, but the type of fruit available changed. And I'm like, I've never seen this fruit in this grocery store before. And I counted 6 different non-Black, non-immigrant families in the grocery store last night alone. And I noticed some of the employees have also begun to change. And I'm like, this is a very interesting thing to be aware of for me, because part of me is like, am I overreacting? Am I reading too much into it? But another part of me knows that I don't think I am. And I see, like, and then they stopped responding. The grocery store chain stopped responding. And I went in and I said, hey, look, you told me earlier this year you would look into it. What were the findings? And I didn't even say anything in the video. I'm just documenting, because I don't want to come off as somebody that's just angry, because in reality I could just use one of my old Essence magazine cards and get a subscription. But in my opinion, I should have the access to what I want to read as a consumer in my neighborhood if I had it previously. I don't understand why it's changed. If they were to respond to me and say sales were down, maybe I was the only one buying Essence magazine from the grocery store. You get what I'm saying? Like, you know, yeah. Like that. I majored in business. I understand supply and demand. Say something back. Say something back. But the lack of response, and then the things that I'm noticing, you know, it has me on high alert about how things change. Because I do think that we have this mindset that we've been not allowed to have the best of things for so long that we don't want to invest in things before they're the best. And I think that that's somewhat problematic. And another thing that I knew in high school that nobody had to tell me, but just thinking about certain things that I read or saw or read between the lines in the textbooks, a lot of the time when we were kept out of predominantly white spaces, it forced us to be more united. So you could have the garbage man and a lawyer living on the same street and being good friends and great neighbors to one another. And now, if you are a lawyer, you don't live in the same neighborhood with your trash man, your postal worker, your firefighter. You know, you kind of have gotten a raise and moved to a different neighborhood. And I think about how many studies or documentaries show that Black children in predominantly white spaces have XYZ effects in adulthood. All of the psychological trauma that they suffer. You know, I just listened to a podcast the other day where they were talking to somebody who was part of the Memphis 11 or something like that. You know, we all know the Little Rock 9, but, you know, he was a first grader, like Ruby Bridges, tasked to integrate a school. And he says he never told his parents what was going on because he knew he didn't want to disappoint them. So can you imagine being 6 years old and being subjected to psychological trauma and all these different things? Like, at least in the movie Ruby Bridges, she had a teacher that was nice to her. And if this child is sharing the experience now, 40 years later, and he's almost 50, 60 years old, whatever the case may be, I think I had the numbers wrong. I think it's 50 years later. 50 or 60 years later, but anyway, he's an older gentleman now, and he's been holding on to that for decades. So there's so many different things that come along with where we choose to shop, eat, live, the way we make those decisions. In the conversation I was having earlier, the person I was talking to wants to buy a home and they feel like they're not ready yet. I said, but you don't know that you're not ready until you sit down with someone who works in that industry. You might be more ready than you think you are, and you don't know what the next steps are until you talk to somebody who knows what they're doing. You know, oh, I don't want to be paying too much right now. Because what I said was, okay, maybe your credit isn't great today, but if you are ready to buy today, you can refinance later and get a better interest rate later. You get what I'm saying? And it was one of those situations where it's like, sometimes you got to take the risk in order to preserve the community or risk losing it all. I can't hear you. No, you have yourself muted.
Here we go.
All right.
Hear me now?
Yes.
All right. You talked about so much in that setting. What I was saying, we're so conditioned, right? We're so conditioned to think a certain way that, like, we don't even recognize it. That's what I talk about, like, us developing and learning our history to develop this form of independency, like to be able to think for ourselves. Like, we are so conditioned from, like, you talk about the 6-year-old kid, and like, I do a lot of work now with DCPMP and the students or kids who are taken from their homes.
Can you break down that acronym for people who might be listening?
What is it? Division of Child Protective, pretty much a Division of Child Protective Services. I forget what the other P stands for. Division of Child Protective. I forget the other P stand for, but it's pretty much DIFAS. It used to be called DIFAS. Now they changed their acronyms to DCPMP, and it's Division of Child Protective Services. And I forget what the
protection and preservation. I know they have like family preservation.
Yeah, it's like they changed it up. So, you know, there's this 6-year-old kid. He's so sweet. Like, he is so adorable. He's busy. He's 6 years old. He's a boy, right? And he was taken from his home, and he was taken out of his elementary school because he had made some comments after his grandmother had passed away. And he just simply said, you know, I want to go to heaven where grandma is. And they took that as a form of suicide comment. And he goes to this other school, this behavioral school, and, you know, he only been there, I want to say, a month and a half. And they want to put the kid on medication because they said that he may have ADHD. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not what he went there for. He went there.
Suicidal ideation. Listen, I don't want to have that conversation today because I would talk for a very long time. But I worked briefly in a mental health clinic, and one of my coworkers shared with me that she heard the psychiatrist say to a pharmacy rep that if there's no father in the home, he automatically prescribes ADHD meds. And I already had a preference not to be in the presence of that particular psychiatrist. So, you know, I kind of felt biased and I didn't hear them make the statement, but there are definitely children that I think don't need to be on meds that are on meds. And I remember in my last workplace setting, I worked at a level 5 school, so many of the children there are on meds for one thing or another. Like you, probably the type of setting that child was sent to, they are a danger to themselves or others. And it's just like, after I talk to this kid, they don't need to be here, and they probably don't need that medication that they're not taking anyway. Like, you know, it just seems like they need a therapist. And there are so many ways that I see our community being manipulated into receiving psychiatric treatment where they're not getting the type of psychiatric treatment that they need. If that makes sense, because I won't say they don't need it, but the way it's being presented to them and what they have to accept in order to receive it, not matching up at all, and I don't like that.
Yeah, it's exactly, and that's why I'm saying, like, that story I tell you about the 6-year-old kid, that has a lot to do with how this world is conditioning us and how they're transforming us. So he's a 6-year-old kid. First of all, he's a boy, right? So boys just by nature are more busy than females. And you're going to, you know, put all of these medications in him to slow him down. Now he's walking around like a zombie. He's 6. He's 6. Like, it just goes to show, you know, like the direction and the path in which this world is trying to, you know, take us to, because he didn't go in for, I mean, I'm not a psychologist. That's not my background as far as emotions is concerned, psychology, but
he didn't go for behavior reference. He went for,
he went for suicide attempts, and the boy just said he wanted to go to heaven. Like, we all
and listening to you, it makes me reflect on the fact that counseling positions are few and far between, or you know, one counselor is tasked to service a school of 300 students or more. And I think that if that child had the opportunity to talk with a psychologist or a therapist counselor, they might have been able to get down to the bottom of the fact that he doesn't want to die or harm himself. A lot of times kids don't understand that heaven is not a place you can go like Burger King.
Right? You says, "I McDonald's, you can have your way. You can't go and come back."
Yeah, like, you know, I say my sister, she's 17 now. We tell this story all the time as a joke, but she used to look at pictures of, we're 10 years apart. So she used to look at pictures of me as a kid and wonder where she was. And she would be like, well, was I at grandma's house? No, you weren't. Was I with my dad? No, you weren't. Like, you know, you weren't at all. Like, you just weren't. You weren't anywhere. You know, you weren't with anybody. You weren't at all. And you know, she just didn't understand that. She was like, so maybe I was at my other grandma's house. Like, did I know you yet?
Like, where was I?
Right. She just didn't have the desire to understand, because we really had that conversation for a lot longer than we probably should have. But it really just wasn't something that clicked for her, that there's a time in life that she didn't exist. She just assumed she was with someone else or around someone else, not that life happened before me. And that's what that sounds like to me. Oh, I want to go to heaven where grandma is. I probably would have said something like that, because for a long time my grandmother was my best friend, and fortunately I still have her around. But I understand now that heaven is not a place down the street that I can go, and that she's not just hiding from me. You know, she's not visiting someone.
Yeah, I mean, this is so much. This is just so much. And really, you know, tying it back into like our history, like, it really does spark your interest. It really does make you intrigued and make you intuitive to want to learn more, because it's like right under our nose, and you know, we don't even know it. You know, we don't even recognize it, because, you know, we're not taught.
Go ahead.
Oh, that's it. We're just not taught.
Oh no, I wanted to say a few weeks ago, maybe last week, I wanted to share on Facebook that I think that it's stupid that they want to build a wall because, and I think you and I were talking about this before the conversation, about seceding and borders and wars. That's you were talking about how we gain territory through war. And for me,
yeah.
I'm like, y'all keep trying to keep Mexicans out of where they were born. Like, they're not. I know that there's border crossing. It's more symbolic than it is real because I was born in New Jersey. So if New York decides to acquire New Jersey, do I have to now move to Delaware because New Yorkers don't want me living in New Jersey anymore? Like, that's just how it seemed to me. And when I was trying to articulate in a Facebook status what I meant, I realized, like you said, just how indoctrinated I was with the idea of conquering a territory that I couldn't find a better way to explain it. And I'm like, yeah, this is not any better than what's happening. Like, my whole thought process behind it and my desire to explain it really just was showing how deeply rooted this country is and taking things that don't belong to them. Like, matter of fact, y'all didn't just take Texas, which used to be Mexico, and say, hey, y'all Mexicans got to move into the other Mexico, like move further into the other Mexico and out of the Mexico that we purchased, because at the end of the day, y'all didn't really own none of the other land either. So, again, it's very
Let's not get into who's the real criminals here.
Yeah,
that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, we like, I'll touch base on it just real quick. But we went to war, or we participated in multiple wars to gain power, to gain territory. And like I was saying to you when we were talking before this, that think ethically, we say that is legal, right? Us fighting in wars, us gaining territory, and identifying our allies and who's against our allies, and who's aligned with us and who's against us. But I consider it to be the same parallel to when you go to the urban communities and you have the gangs and the drug dealers fighting for territory, right? Everyone's fighting for power. It's just that when you, like you said, when you put on the fatigue uniform, it's legal, but when you got on certain colors, it's illegal. Again, it's all about the condition, and again, it's about the perception. But what's good for the goose should be good for the gander. And we just have to find a way to say that that's not right, and what they're doing is not right either. Like, no one's right. Like, the way in which we're gaining territory, the way in which we're gaining power, it should not be violence.
Absolutely. And I know that we've gone on several tangents here, so I only have a few more questions for you. But I know that as a professional speaker, you do some speaking inside of the prison system. Can you tell me a little bit of what that's like for you?
Wait, say that again?
As a professional speaker, you've done some stuff like in the juvenile detention centers and in the prison system. What has that experience been like for you?
So that, being able to speak at the juvenile detention center has been monumental for me, because what I do there is I volunteer there when they have a class. So for Camden County, they have this 400 diversion program where students who are getting into so much trouble in school, at home, being disrespectful to their parents, not respecting teachers, getting suspended, committing crimes that will really get them as an adult some serious time into the correction facility. You pretty much, it's like an apprehension. So we try to go in and we speak to them, and I have a one-on-one with them in a group setting, and I have like their information that comes across for me as far as like what crimes they committed. So to give you an idea, like, these are kids who, like, one kid he stole $2,000, I believe it was, from his mom on her credit card with one of those games. I forget what it's called. One of them, the addicting games you play on TV or online. I remember I did a video about it. The name of it escapes me, but I'll describe it. So you'll be able to purchase clothing, like the avatar is free, but you got to purchase clothing. Fortnite, yes. So this kid, like he stole money from his mom, and so that was one incident, and he just kept doing it, and that would get him in trouble because in the state of New Jersey, right, that's theft. So and your degree goes up based off of the amount of money in which you stole. So so talking to kids about letting them know like the reality of it, like you think that oh, you're just stealing from mommy and she can get it back, but mommy is single parent, she's the only one. So when you steal from her, you're stealing from yourself. You're stealing the food off your own table. You're stealing the food out of your own refrigerator, clothes off your own back, the heat in your home. So just explaining to them, the reality of it, and explain to them like where, if you keep up this act, where you're going to end up, and explain to them that you should, try to strive for a better life, right? Don't try to, make things more difficult for your parents. So for me, like being able to get in front of them before they get to that correctional facility. Like I explained to them, like when I first did my first speaking engagement there, honest to God truth, I did not know where the front door was, because as a detective, when I transported the kid, whoever was getting locked up and who was being committed to the juvenile detention center, we always had to go through the side gate, verify ourselves, and then bring them in through the back, through the cell. And like for me, I tell that story to every time I go there to speak, to just explain to them that, listen, you walking through the front door, you're getting a chance to walk out. Don't keep up this poor act. Then you have to be transported to the back. So just being able to talk to them before they get there, try to apprehend, just like transform their thinking is monumental. So that's how it is for being able to speak at the correctional facility.
That's powerful. I asked that question because I know here in Maryland, I had volunteered for the better part of 2016, 2017 with Family League's Coalition for Children of Incarcerated Parents. And in one of the sessions I went to, they talked about statistically how likely certain neighborhoods in Baltimore are to have an incarcerated population, and then for the children in that neighborhood to be to continue the cycle and land in that impoverished situation. So I do think that it's very fitting with the conversation you and I were having about fathers who don't show up and they are not where they say they're going to be. That fortunately, well, I won't say fortunately because I don't know if that was your experience or not, but it didn't sound like in what you shared he was incarcerated at all during those periods of time. Whereas in my situation, he was incarcerated for the majority of my childhood and a portion of my adulthood as well. But that kind of made it more heightened for me to be available or to want to be available when he was making these promises that he didn't keep. So in getting back to our initial discussion about your relationship with your dad and how, you had a couple of good moments last year and no real follow-up since. What is one thing that you've learned from your dad? And after you answer that, I have a follow-up question. I don't want to ask you two questions in
the one thing that I learned from my father, that's a good question. The one thing that I learned from my father, I learned so many things. I'm trying to give you a really good answer.
I mean, if you have more than one, you feel free to share, but I usually just ask for like the one.
The one. That's what I'm trying to think of. What is the one? Wow. The one thing that I learned from my father is to one thing I learned is that, like I say, like whenever I have that opportunity to become a mother, right, and let's say it does not work out with me and the guy who I conceive with, if it doesn't work out, to be able to separate the relationship and the parenting. That's one thing that I definitely learned looking into the future, because it's not fair to that child. I also learned that I never want to be like, and I guess this comes from my father, my relation with my father. I don't want to be that parent who goes back and forth with that baby mama, baby daddy drama. Like my mom and dad never had that, right? Because he wasn't there. My mom she wasn't hearing that, But that's one thing that I definitely learned from him, like looking into the future as a woman who wants to have children, who wants to raise a family. And I always say this, I want to be able to raise a child with both mom and dad in the household. Like I always say, I want to be exposed. I want to have my children to be exposed to something that I wasn't exposed to. So that's big for me. But my dad has taught me so many things, and just not being there, right? Because sometimes I go back and forth when I was younger, like, oh well, what if my dad was in my life? And then I say, well, Shy, no, trust the path that God has aligned for you. Who's to say, what woman I would be today? So I'm thankful. Unfortunately, yeah, it has caused, right, some I don't want to say some like not behavioral issue, but mental. Like you think about like, okay, am I not good enough, right? Because like, well, damn, if my father, wasn't there for me, like how can any other man be, right? Because my father, it initiates with him, right? And like even like when things didn't follow through after we met and we went to the bowling together, like he really truly taught me that I am enough. And from that point on, like, and to say that, Shy, if it doesn't work out, it's okay, right? It's okay. Like I had to learn, like I had to move on, right? I had to say, okay, well, I tried. Even as an adult, I tried. I broke bread with the man. He taught me how to bowl properly as far as the footing and everything. Okay, but it didn't progress. It didn't progress. So it's okay. And for me to walk away knowing that I put in that effort and knowing that, okay, well, Shy, you know what, you are enough, but that's his loss, just like it would be any other man's loss who walk away. So before I can sit here and have a relationship with another man, I had to first, this is one thing I realized, that I had to first be able to close that chapter. Because in a sense, like if we don't address it, like as women, if we don't address like what's going on or what has happened with our fathers, it lingers into our relationships.
Amen.
And we'd be surprised. It took me a while to answer this question. I was trying to think of some answers, but it really does linger. So like I would tell you, I'm about to turn 32 on the 7th. I don't know when it's gonna go, but on the 17th, right? And I will truly say I am loving my 30s. Like I'm learning more about myself. I'm falling in love with myself. Like last night, like all day yesterday, I just had a day with myself. You know what I mean? Like I had a vending opportunity. Then I went for a massage. Then I went to the Harriet Tubman statue over on Bristol Bridge. I went to a screening of Politics as Usual. Then I went to an art gallery. Then I went got me some Spanish food in Camden, came home, ate, took a shower, sleep. So I'm learning to fall in love with myself and really attesting to I am enough. Like if you don't want to pursue a relationship with your daughter, then that's okay. It's okay. You try, move on. But you have to be able to close that door, close that chapter before you can try to move on with somebody else. Like there's things that linger. Like I learned, like I was telling you earlier, like I learned that I don't like being ignored. And I really had this conversation with one of my women groups a couple days ago. And it really just hit me like, I don't like being ignored. I always knew that, I acknowledged that, but I didn't know where it came from. And I was just talking it out, and I said, it has to come from my father, because when I would call him like, oh, Dad, you said you were going to be somewhere, leave a message, he would not return the call, or we didn't have text message back then, but I would constantly call, whether it be his girlfriend's house, or I'll call his mom's house looking for him, or call his cell phone, and whether it be disconnected or on, or leave a message, he does not respond. And I remember looking into like my relationship when like my dude wouldn't respond in the time in which I wanted. Oh, it's a whole problem. Like, why it take you so long? Babe, I was asleep. Okay, all right. At least I'm over exaggerating. The man can sleep, but I really, like I said this last week during my call with the women group, that I have to realize that the man in which I'm dating is not my father. So again, like those preconceived notions that I've had with my father, I can't allow that to linger into my relationship and put that, right, and put that characteristic on the man in which I'm dating, because they're separate. They're two different men. And it's not fair to the guy in which I'm dating. Like, how is he supposed to know that I don't like being ignored besides me telling him, and me, picking up from when my father left me with being ignored, and me just putting that on him with the guy in which I'm dating? It's just not fair. Like, they're not at the same playing level, So my dad has taught me a lot, and through his lack of activity, and I mean, I'm grateful for it. Like he came to my 30th birthday party. I invited him, and he made this whole big scene, apologizing, crying, and it made me cry as well. My mom like, okay, thank you, she's taking the mic. Like, my mom is just different, and it's just the same thing. Like every event, he's apologizing, he's crying. So, my success, him seeing my success, makes him extremely emotional, and he has taught me that, to forgive, like to truly forgive, like, because it's not about him, it's about me. It really is about me. Like, he taught me to forgive and to move on. Like, even to this day, like, even though things didn't progress, if he was to call me and say, Shy, do you want to meet? Sure, Pops, whatever. Like, it's fine. Like, we can do that, because I'm not going to hold that against you, because, life is unexpected. Some people don't have their fathers in their life, like literally, like physically not here. Whereas, mine, he's still here, even though we don't have that relationship. But to forgive him so I can move on, and just know that, his actions should not have any bearing on the men in which I date. It's just not fair. So just to forgive and to start with a clean sheet when you're dating, but to also to acknowledge, what your challenges are from your relationship with your father.
You just preached a whole sermon, okay? So, no, and I appreciate you for that, because I want to go for the listeners who are brand new and don't know, and even for you, before the discussion room was a thing, I had a blog called Dealing with Daddy Issues that later became Damn Daddy, and one of my first blog posts was about dating with daddy issues, and how, people always tell you that women date men like their fathers, and I was like, how I'm gonna do that if I don't know the guy? But as an adult now, and it's been almost 4 years since I started the blog and I wrote that post at all, I see not just my biological father, but the men that I looked up to. I see traits of those people in the person that I had been dating, and I'm like, sometimes they're great traits and they remind me of happy moments and being nurtured by the men in my life. And sometimes it's like, oh, how I pick a guy with that, and so sometimes it's not even intentional, but I definitely agree with you that if you don't address it, it will continue to linger. And so when I started writing those blog posts and doing that self-reflection, I had a similar experience. I realized that I don't like being yelled at, because my mom was in a relationship with somebody who always was on 10. And I'm like, nope, when I have my own relationships, you can't talk to me on 10. Not for any reason at all. If you need to go past a level 7 and it's not a joyous moment, you need to go past a level 7 outside and come back and talk to me when you've calmed down. So, but I want to address what you said as far as how is he going to know that I don't like being ignored unless I tell him? And I think that was something that was pivotal for me, was being able to be open and honest with the people that I was dating, that, hey, I'm experiencing some carryover impact from somebody else's F up. And I didn't acknowledge it. You know, I didn't even think I had daddy issues until 2015, to be honest. Like, you know, he was in and out of jail, but I had an uncle, a grandfather, and several other people who made sure I was okay. I didn't feel abandoned overall, but I did realize that that lack of relationship was playing a bigger role than I was willing to acknowledge until 2015. So now I try to go into those relationships and situations and be honest and say, hey, if you and I happen to have a disagreement, please don't yell at me. I'm not going to receive that well. If this, that, and the third goes on, please know that just communicate with me. I can't emotionally handle not knowing things. I need that communication. It's like, I'm not an FBI agent. I don't want to know where you at, what you're doing, who you with all the time. But if we got plans for Sunday at 5, and I say, hey, what's up, Sunday at 2 p.m., and then you don't hit me back until Monday, I have a problem with that. You know, I kind of need you to fill in the details for me there. Or, you know, I'm an understanding person. Things happen in my life all the time. Opportunities come up where I need to go to Philly, to Jersey, to DC. And I try to be open and honest and say, hey, I know we had plans for this day and this time. However, this opportunity has come up for me. Will you be bothered if I choose that opportunity over what we had planned? And depending on what the opportunity is, if that person says yes, they'll be bothered, I'll see if I can reschedule that opportunity. Like, hey, I already had plans. Is there any way we can do this on a different day? Most of the time, because I respect, you know, I'm respectful enough to have that conversation, they just say, nah, do your thing. You know, do your thing, be successful. I know what you're working toward. So no, I'm not bothered. But I try to lay forth that open communication, because you are absolutely right. If you don't address it, it lingers, and it just has such a carryover effect. And you specifically said that you're grateful that things went the way they did, because who knows what God's plan had for you. And I think that speaks to your point of forgiveness, because I've shared this before, but for me, I was not in a position to forgive my biological father until he had written me a letter one time. My aunt gave it to me. And in it, he said if he could change things, he wouldn't, because he doesn't know. Sorry, it's a little pop-up came up. But he gave me the he said he wouldn't change things because his presence may have caused more damage in my life than his absence. And, you know, I'm like, you know, because of all of the lifestyle that he was into at the time, he just was like, you know what, my presence might have been worse for you than my absence was. So I felt like it was some BS at the time that I read it, but in learning of other things, there are people who I've interviewed here in the discussion room or just in conversations about what I do, even some of the kids that I've worked with, that it's been an adverse impact to have their dad in the home because the dad is alcoholic, the dad is abusive, you know, all these other different things that I didn't have to deal with because he wasn't there. Mm-hmm. So very interesting.
You said something, I'm trying to remember. It escapes me. It'll come back to me. But you said something. I can't remember. It just escaped me. It'll come back to me, hopefully, before we end.
Well, I was just about to wrap up. If you have anything that you want to share, definitely send it to me. I'll put it in the show notes so that people can come back, and when they're listening to this episode, they can go to damndaddy.com and pull up a link for a proud Black girl and proud Black boy in your merchandise and all of that. And my last question to you, I'm gonna let you get your thought off before I say my question, because I don't want to say. Okay.
It was when I remember when I was about to graduate from college. So this is another. Okay, so remember when I told you how when I was getting ready to go to college, I went to my father and asked him to help me. And I remember my senior year, probably a month or two before I was about to graduate, I had this breaking moment. I'm in my dorm. I'm actually in my room. And I just started crying. I don't know what, something just came over me. And I called my mom and I'm like, this man don't even love me. Like he's not even in my life. And somehow my mother got in contact with him. I don't know how. I have no idea how she got in contact with him so quickly. And he called me, and he asked me, and he pretty much was trying to reassure me that he loves me. And that lasted for about, I don't think, like 2 days. Then it didn't progress again, right? So patterns. Sorry, I'm a former detective, so I pick up on patterns.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember after I graduated from college, I wanted to change my last name. Like, I was so serious. I got the application. Like, I wasn't always this forgiving. Like, I wasn't always where I'm currently at with being able and open to forgiving him. Even to the point, like when he accepted my friend request, or I think he sent me a friend request on Facebook, and I sent him like a message, like just going in, like, how do you not be there for your daughter? Your daughter is like you are the first male figure in her life, and and I wanted to change my last name because my last name is Williams, but my family last name is Jones. For one, I got tired of always being last, right? In alphabetical order, right? And I wanted to change my last name. I was so adamant about it. And I remember I got the application, I filled it out, and I emailed it to my mom. And my mom, in a sense, talked me off the ledge. She's like, Shy, no, everyone knows you as Shy Williams. I'm like, well, so what? No, I don't want him to have I don't want to have his last name. There's nothing that that represents him in me besides me having his last name. And she talked me out of it. But I mean, when I tell you bitter, like, I was bitter towards my father for, I would say, from me going to college to probably about 2 years ago, and yeah, I mean, I was very, very bitter, very angry towards him because it was mainly because he recently married a couple years ago a woman who had 5 kids. And that really just hit me off. That really just like what's the word I'm looking for? A jet or whatever. I'm not thinking of it, but like a rocket, 3, 2, 1. Like, it really just took me off when I learned that he was marrying a woman with 5 kids. Bro, you can't even take care of your own 3. I just didn't understand it. It was like, and that just ignited me even more. And that's probably what led to the Facebook rants. I think, So after I learned he was married, that's when we became friends on Facebook. Because there was an event that he was supposed to attend for me, but he didn't. He ended up going to an event with her. So I wasn't always. So again, like, there's a process. Absolutely. Right? There's definitely a process, but I wasn't always, where I'm currently at. I wasn't always forgiving. This is just like yesterday in a sense. With it being last year. So it took some time, but again, I had to learn myself and really take the initiative to say, you know what, this is for me, this is not for him. And be okay with it.
I know so many women who want to change their last names. I know so many people who get upset when their dads are in relationship with other people with kids because it's like, oh, so now you want to be a father? Like, so there's just so much more we could talk about, and we would probably be here all night.
All night.
But the last thing I want to know is, what is one thing that you look forward to having grow within your relationship with your dad in the future? Or like one optimistic outcome that you had for you guys repairing that relationship?
I don't know. Yeah, I'm not even sure. I in a sense, I want to say I got everything. Like, I never was a kid in need. Like, my mother, my grandmother, my uncle, when I look back, they made sure that, wherever area he lacked, they filled. My uncle, you talk about, like, the men who are in your life, you see the resemblance with the men in your selection of dating. And I see that as well. My uncle, he's not only my uncle, but he's looked upon as like a bigger brother, and also like a father figure, all in one. He's actually called me while we're doing this. He just kept on calling. So it's like now he's like playing the role of an annoying big brother. Like, I just declined you. Stop. But would just say maybe consistency. You know, I'm not looking for it, but if it happens, hey, you know, then that's great. You know, again, so like if it happens, it's just an addition. You know, but it doesn't subtract anything from my life because I'm still going to live my life. But I mean, it would be nice, you know. But if it doesn't happen, hey, it's okay. You know, that's how I truly feel because, you know, I believe in the path in which God has aligned for me. Whether he's in it, he being my father, whether he's in it or not. But that would be the only thing. I mean, I don't really need anything from him. And again, it goes back to how my mother raised me. Mm-hmm. You know, yeah. It's up to him. I'm enough. Like, I'm enough for you to want to be consistent. And if you don't see that, then, you know, you gotta go to eye doctor, baby. But
like you said, his laws. You know what? It's been great talking to you this evening, and I just want you to remind people where they can find more on Shy Williams and Shy Speaks in the future.
Yeah, so my Instagram handle and Twitter handle is @IamShyWilliams. And also my website is www.speakshy.com. And on there you can find my books. You know, follow me on Instagram. I'm always giving up a gem on educate, empower, and inspire the urban mind.
And that's Shy, SHY Williams.
Yes, Shy, common spelling.
Yes.
Please don't extra letters to my name. SHY, Shy. And I always get the shy, you shy. No, I'm not shy. So SHY Williams, common spelling with an S.
Okay. And for those of you who are listening, I'm Miss Reid, and you can follow me on all social media at DAAA M like Mary, N like Nancy, Daddy. Again, that's DAAA M in Daddy. And definitely visit damndaddy.com for more content like this and more. Thank you for listening, Shy.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.